Hi, my name is Anthony Martin. I'm the Senior Field Services Program Manager covering Southeast Iowa with the Research Center for Farming Innovation. Today, I'm going to be covering some work we completed using our historical data from years of working with fungicide and insecticide. So, first question here was, what is the need? Especially as we see increasing soybean prices, the decision to apply pesticides to entire fields or operations is becoming more feasible from a cost standpoint. Often those foliar fungicide and insecticide applications are going to be done at the same time, combined application. And that's done just to increase productivity and reduce infield operations, number of times you need to pass over that field. Decision-making process on whether or not to apply these chemicals is going to be different for everyone. Some might be doing it as an insurance application. Some might have identified some infield issues, but the core question kind of comes down to whether those applications are going to be agronomically and economically justified. Then additional questions, when we consider the implications on resistance, given the possible continued use of the same product year after year, positive yield responses from synergistic effects of that combined application. That's been well documented in industry and university research. So for these reasons, we want to take a deeper dive into some of the historical fungicide and insecticide data that we've conducted. So first, let's just take a quick jump into resistance and how it can become a problem. Had a hard time finding a good picture for this example, so you get a crude breakdown here. So the blue hexagons are going to be the susceptible individuals within a population, and the red hexagons are going to represent the resistant individuals. So going from left to right there, starting with that number one or stage one, we see the overall population where we have kind of a mixture of both susceptible and resistant. Obviously, we only have 4 resistant individuals in that population. Following that starting point, there's going to be some sort of a selection event, which in our case would be a pesticide application. And with that, we're going to remove those susceptible individuals from the population, and only the resistant individuals are going to survive. So as that population increases following that selection event, we get to that point 3 where, we have a higher percentage of the individuals with resistance. They're coming through. That cycle is going to continue with, those selection events, removing the susceptible individuals, increasing the resistant individuals, until we get to stage 5 there, where our population is basically flipped from where we started, where the majority are going to be with resistant. Obviously, pretty simplified explanation. It can take years for issues to become apparent, but it's just kind of a good insight on how the process can work. Point I really want to make with this is that by applying our chemicals when not needed, or we're going off-label with a reduced rate, we're essentially adding those selection events into the cycle, which otherwise wouldn't have occurred. So taking a look at the trials, so we had 24 3-treatment trials looking at fungicide, which would have been Priaxor, fungicide and insecticide with Priaxor, and then fast-act insecticide, and then a untreated check strip. These are all done from 2013 to 2016. You can see the statewide distribution there on the map at the top. We ran all of these, had the individual results done in our final reports, which you can find on our database, online database. And then what we wanted to do was some additional analysis, start building an online tool to aid with decision making for farmers within the ISOFAST system. So looking at the collective results of those 3 treatment trials, we can start kind of seeing some interesting things in the data set. First, we have that graph on the right-hand side. showing yield comparisons for the fungicide only application versus untreated. That's going to be in the red. And then the darker lines are showing that combined fungicide insecticide application versus the untreated. So from the 24 trials that we conducted, an average of 2 bushel response with the use of the fungicide alone, and that ranged from 1.75 to 2.5 bushel per acre. The fungicide alone resulted in significant yield responses at each location, while the combined application only showed significant yield response at 13 of the 24 trials, so approximately 50%, just over 50%. And then finally, that combined application averaged 3.2 bushel per acre yield response. But again, that wasn't consistent. If we take a little closer look at the general trends in that graph, we can start seeing some variability between the treatments. So highlighted in red there, just looking at the fungicide only, we can see a pretty consistent range there, and that's really consistent between trials. So what this is showing is that there was little variability between sites for that fungicide only application. And if we jump and look at the combined application, that's really widening out. And so that addition of the insecticide, we're adding about a one bushel to the overall average yield response. But we can see that variability is greatly increased. Range of yield responses was pretty large for nearly all of those trials. For the combined application. And, in some instances, as we get towards the bottom of the graph there, we can see that range is starting to dip into the negative. Now, one thing I should note is that we didn't have in-depth scouting for all of these trials, so it's kind of hard to determine exactly why we see these ranges. For the positive trials, insect and disease levels may have warranted those applications, whereas sites with little or no pressure may have been on the lower end. One thing I mentioned earlier was that synergistic effect with the combined application. So, specifically in the combined application, the effects would basically be greater than what we would have anticipated with the fungicide alone and the insecticide alone. The sum of those is going to be greater. So with that kind of data set pulled together, we wanted to build this online tool to aid in farmer decision making. One benefit of this is for the user to be able to visualize different pricing scenarios for their operation, determine how they might impact overall returns. So shown below is the input screen that the user would see. Changes here can be made to the price of soybeans as well as the chemical and application costs. So for the next couple slides, I'm going to be showing I had put in $13.50 for the soybean price, and then $24.50 for the combined application cost, and $15.50 for that fungicide only cost. So what we get is a graph showing the probability of an economic return, along with a breakdown of yield and pricing results. Here again, coloring scheme is going to be same as before, with red being that fungicide only, darker color being the combined application. We can see that for these specific prices and costs, we would need to see a 1.8 bushel per acre yield response for that combined application, or 1.1 bushel per acre for the fungicide only application. Excuse me. The probability of exceeding those costs for both programs is going to be 99%. So we're basically we're very certain that we're going to be able to break even, at least break even. So here again, because the soybean market price is so high, we really don't need much to pay for the product and the application. So all of the historical trials that we had showed mean yield response over the needed break-even value. We would expect to have a profit in the high teens for these. For this particular scenario, like I mentioned, everything is coming up gold. Again, these results are going to change depending on what the user inputs. And as expected, the decision becomes more impactful when our prices are low and those chemical and application costs get higher. So just to illustrate how those results can change, you can see here I have two matrix. The one on the left is going to be just for that fungicide only application. The one on the right is the combined application. So if we were to look at this and we wanted to obtain a $5 return from our application, we're going to need to be somewhere below or to the left of the that dark kind of zigzagging line going down through. And again, this is, I lowered the soybean price a little bit on these. So using the values at the center of each of these, where the soybean price would be $9.50, fungicide only $15.50, and then the fungicide insecticide is $24.50. Our probability of exceeding our costs is going to drop to 83% for that fungicide only, or for the combined, and 89% for the fungicide only, with the low end of our expected profit range dipping into the negative or below zero. Still pretty good odds of coming up positive, but we can start to see that there's some doubt. We're not near that 99% high end. So this tool is not meant to be an end all be all. It's simply something for the user to have when making economical decisions, making these decisions. So to summarize this work, just wanted to hit on some takeaway points. First, and this is really important in my opinion, is that even when we are predicting positive economic responses to these applications, we really need to consider the actual needs of the crop. Now, if there's little or no pest pressure in the field, not necessarily going to recommend applying, the fungicide or the insecticide. Really, in order to make those decisions, we need to continue scouting those fields in a timely manner in order to see the current crop status and identify any potential issues. If we're monitoring those pest levels in the field, we can see, if those populations are trending towards our thresholds, potentially making a proactive application instead of a reactive one. Finally, I touched on this at the very beginning, we run the risk of resistance developing for either or both products if we're choosing to apply every year as insurance, or we're doing it off-label, and when, our pest levels are not, warranting them. Again, timely scouting to make informed decisions is going to be recommended. Or, at the very least, if you are going to spray every year, making sure to rotate chemicals with different group numbers. So I appreciate you tuning in for this presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any member of RCFI, and we'll do our best to get those answered. Thanks.